Good morning, and welcome to the Morning Exchange on VOICEcorps. My name is David Weaver. I'm the Executive Director of the Ohioana Book Festival, and today's show is all about this year's Book Festival, the 16th Annual Ohioana Book Festival. Joining me on the show today are four authors, two of them in the studio and two of them joining remotely. So let me introduce here in the studio with me, Mark Darden, who is the author of Elijah Goes to Cleveland, Donna Wyland, the author of 'Twas the Night Before Jesus, and joining us by the miracle of technology is Bayyinah Monk-Nduaka, the author of Gimme That Recipe Spring Cookbook, and Tassone, the author of Francesca, a novel. So welcome to all of you to VOICEcorps and to the Ohioana Book Festival. So who would like to start off and everything? But first of all, I want to make sure, Bayyinah and Don, you're out there.
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So this is going to be very exciting. I am delighted. So let me go just in alphabetical order. So Mark Darden here with a children's picture book called Elijah Goes to Cleveland. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your book.
So, hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Darden, and a little bit about myself. I'm a huge sports fan, so my favorite teams are the Ohio State Buckeyes, Cleveland Guardians, Cleveland Browns, as well as the Cavs. I'm originally from Cleveland, but I've lived here in Columbus for about the last 10 years. So for the inspiration behind Elijah Goes to Cleveland, I was looking for books or children's books about Cleveland, and I think I've only found one, but it was published way back in like the late 90s. So I said to myself, hey, I could do something like that. And I just started doing all the research online to see what would be the best way to create the book. And in September 2021, I finally released the book out to the world, and I'm here today to help promote the book as well as the Ohioana Book Festival.
Well, thank you, Mark. Wonderful. We're delighted to have you here. My friend, originally from, actually born in Philadelphia, which I did not know, Bayyinah, but you were a longtime resident of Columbus and now live in the Washington, D.C. area, and you are the author of Gimme That Recipe Spring Cookbook.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I was out of my college as well, so that's my roots in Columbus. But hi, everybody. Thanks for having me on today. My name is Bayyinah Monk-Nduaka. I'm the founder and owner of Gimme That Recipe Lifestyle Company, where we publish cookbooks, self-help books, and I have a seasoning line. Gimme That Recipe Spring Cookbook is one of the cookbooks I have in my cookbook collection. And it's a cookbook that with a collection of recipes that represents everything spring. That's bright, refreshing, and renewal recipes that awaken the taste buds after winter's heavy meals. Spring is the symbol of renewal. So I wanted to put recipes together that, represent spring. And some of my inspirations as far as authors, I would say Maya Angelou, Toni Morrison, writers from the Harlem Renaissance. And as an author, we have a business side. So I was also inspired by Danielle Steele's, her continuous publication of books, and she's still publishing books. So as an author, that was also, as a business side, that also inspired me.
Excellent, thank you. And also on the line is Don Tassone. And Don, tell me and everything. I should have checked you beforehand. How do you pronounce your last name?
Well, it's pronounced a variety of ways. You're close. We typically say Tassone.
Don Tassone, welcome, the author of Francesca, a novel, which you have written both two novels and several collections of short stories, correct?
That's right. Yeah, two novels, 6 collections of short stories. The latest collection has come out just about a month ago called Collected Stories. My background is actually in the corporate world. I was an English major in college and then went to work for Procter & Gamble. I'm originally from Dayton, Ohio, and I've grown up and done spent most of my life in Cincinnati area. I'm calling you this morning from Loveland, which is a northern suburb of Cincinnati. So I got busy, went to work, spent 31 years there, had a great career at P&G, and I worked in public relations, which was heavily dependent on good writing, of course. So writing was a key part of my career, but it was primarily business writing, and I made the switch to creative writing, which was a little bit of a journey for me about 7 years ago when I began writing creatively and submitting my work to literary journals and magazines and getting published. Since then, as you mentioned, David, I've had 2 novels and 6 short story collections published. I've had over 300 stories now published, I'm happy to say. And I'm working now on a novella, which I'm just beginning to query publishers about. As far as my featured book this year, Francesca, it's a novel that came out last summer. It is about the first female pope. It's set in the year 2055, about 30 years or so from now. And the main character, whose name is Jessica, takes the papal name Francesca. This is a story about her journey and the challenges she faces, and for the most part handles fairly well along the way. But it's also a story about purpose. This was my deeper purpose in writing this novel. What is our purpose? What is most important to us? What matters most? And what must we do? These are the questions that Jessica and eventually Francesca asks herself along the way as a girl growing up in Springfield, Missouri, near St. Louis, as a wife and a mother, as a politician, as the pastor of a small parish in St. Louis, and ultimately the leader of a great church. And along the way, she invites her fellow Catholics to ask themselves these questions too, and in the process, opens minds and renews the church. My other reason for writing this particular book is I have a strong and abiding interest and conviction that women should be given every opportunity to lead in our world in every realm of life, including religion.
Excellent. Well, in 2055, I'll be 103 years old, so I'll see if your prediction comes true. As to what is our purpose, that goes in perfectly to my other guest who is here in the studio with me, Donna Wyland, who is the author of 'Twas the Night Before Jesus. So welcome, Donna. Tell us a little bit about your book, and obviously, your inspiration comes from a very specific source.
It does indeed. Thank you, David. It's so good to be here. I'm happy to have an opportunity to talk about my work and my books. And I actually grew up in a small town in northwest Ohio, surrounded by farms, though my father was not a farmer necessarily, and just always had a yearning to write. I have journals from when I was a child up until today, so I've just got oodles of them all over in a closet at home. And while I went to college, got a 4-year degree in business, and worked in the business field for a number of years, I kept coming back to the writing. Something kept pulling me back, which I believe now is God. He intended for me to write Christian children's books to encourage their faith and to comfort them and let them know that He's always with them and that they have a home in heaven. So my third book just was published last year, titled 'Twas the Night Before Jesus, and the inspiration for that, besides my faith, is the fact that I'm a grandmother. And I recognized each Christmas more and more that it was all about Santa, all about presents, which is so fun and so wonderful. But I really wanted to kind of draw my grandson and hopefully other children into the truth of it being the celebration of the birth of Christ. So I love Dr. Seuss. He's always been a great inspiration of mine. And I started working with some poetic stanzas, and eventually came up with a very similar book to 'Twas the Night Before Jesus. I'm sorry, 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, only it's titled 'Twas the Night Before Jesus. So it's a look not only at the birth of Jesus, but also His life, what He came to do, to save us, and then a celebration of that at Christmas.
Well, thank you, Donna. Thank all of you for introducing your books to us. I do want to say that you are listening to The Morning Exchange on VOICEcorps. We're talking about the 2022 Ohioana Book Festival. My thanks to the VOICEcorps for letting us take over the Morning Exchange this morning to talk about this. And the authors that you're listening to with me today are just 4 of the more than 100 authors taking part in this year's festival. And when I say taking part, it's taking part from everything like conversations like we're having right now, panel discussions, readings, conversations. And so it's everything. We like to say there's something for every reader of every age at the Ohioana Book Festival, you know, from mystery to history, from poetry to picture books. And in fact, I was thinking to myself as we're the 4 of us are talking today that about the only thing we're missing in here is somebody who's a poet. So, but it's delightful, and again, we're thrilled to be talking about the Ohioana Book Festival, which this program actually too, and we're delighted that so many people are listening in. This program is actually going to be uploaded. The entire Ohioana Book Festival is going to be uploaded online and be on YouTube once the festival completes this Sunday. So even if you missed a program, you can go back and listen to it. Or if you listen to one that you really enjoyed and said, hey, I'd like to listen to that one again. So we're delighted to be able to do that and delighted to be on Morning Exchange with our guests, Mark Darden, Bayyinah Monk-Nduaka, Don Tassone, and Donna Wyland. I kind of paused there because I again, Don Tassone. Don, again, give that to me, your name.
Don Tassone.
Don Tassone. Okay, so it actually, I'm going to write in here Tassone, Tassone. That will help me. So one of the things that, coming back to Mark, now I've watched one of your readings before. It is so delightful. One can tell you're really enthused and into it. But I like the fact that you were talking about the fact that even though you're now living in Columbus, you're probably your heart is in Cleveland, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's my hometown, so it's always going to be in my heart.
Yes. What brought you down to Columbus?
So I went to school at Ohio State, and after I graduated in 2012, I just stayed down here.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so being down here for the last 10 years, I love it. So I consider Columbus like a second hometown, but Cleveland is always going to be number 1 for me.
Excellent. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Bayyinah. Now, I know you live in the Washington, D.C. area with your husband and family. How long have you been? How long were you? Because people always ask me, well, how do you define what is an Ohio author? And our thing is, if you were born here or you lived here at least 3 years, Ohioana, we will claim you as an author, regardless of how far away you go. So Bayyinah, you might be in D.C., but we're calling you an Ohio author. How long were you here?
I was in Columbus for about 8 years. I was Otterbein, and then after that, I worked for Chase Manhattan. So, for about 8 years. So I definitely lived in Columbus in the local part, and I, know much about the city. So I do consider myself, an Ohioan.
Well,
yeah.
Well, that is great because I know you were born in Philly, so you've kind of lived in several different places. Now, I have to ask, and now this is very unusual. You have a bachelor's degree in mortuary science.
Yes, I have a bachelor's degree in mortuary science. I'm a licensed funeral director, so that's pretty much my career, my bread and butter. But kind of like the other author, she said, is you kind of go, if your calling is writing, you never kind of leave it. So it's always calling you to it. So that's kind of been my journey with writing.
Wow. Yes. Well, I can tell you, I'm pretty sure this is the 16th annual Ohioana Book Festival. I don't think we've ever had a funeral director who was an author before. So, so that,
Yes,
so, so wonderful. Thank you again so much. And
yes,
Don,
thank you.
yes, Don, you mentioned being in the corporate world, and again, were you working? What was the Give us a little more about the field that you were working in during your career. So you basically have always been writing, but you had this other career for a long time.
I did, and I do love writing. As the other authors are saying, this is a real passion area, I think, for all of us, and we find our way to it one way or another at some point along the course of our lives. I've loved writing since I was a kid, really loving the writing that I was hearing on TV. I was a child of the TV age, and so shows even like The Twilight Zone, and as I was growing up, shows like All in the Family. That writing and the topics, the themes that they were writing about, that were so important, but in some cases a little taboo, but very vital. Really struck a chord with me, and so. I've been drawn to writing and the beauty of it, but also the power of it, and its ability to convey important messages and important stories to us since I was a kid. I did join P&G right out of college. I ended up spending my career there 31 years in what started as something called public relations. We had a very tiny group then, and as the company grew and the function grew and the world changed, ended up having the good fortune to help lead the development of an organization there called External Relations, which was a global organization. I ended up as a VP there. And the reason I mention that is because it afforded me the opportunity to travel the world, and which I loved and was a broadening experience for me. I've lived in Ohio, and most of that in the Cincinnati area for almost all of my life, with the exception of a stint about 20 years ago in Germany. I was there, and my family joined me there, and for P&G, and that was a wonderful broadening experience as well. But for those of you who have come to Cincinnati and maybe flown into Cincinnati, you're aware that our airport, oddly enough, is not in Ohio. It's in northern Kentucky, near Covington, and as you come in, it's a very hilly and very hilly area of Ohio, like the eastern part of Ohio. Against the Ohio River there. And as you drive in from that airport, as I did countless times, you see the city revealed, and it's just a beautiful sight, night or day, but especially at night, and lit up. And so I was always glad to see that. I was always overjoyed to be home, and frankly, I wouldn't live anywhere else. This is where my wife and I have chosen to continue to make our home, and we raised our family here, and there's just so much about Ohio that I love, everything from the seasons to the whole Midwestern, feel and the attitude here. It's a joy to be a part of this group today and part of the Ohioana Book Festival. I only hope, David, that we're actually able to get together post-pandemic, perhaps next year in person.
Yes, definitely. We never thought, Don, when the Ohioana Book Festival had already been announced in April 2020 when COVID hit, and we just thought we're going to postpone it to August. This will be over by then. Ha ha. Little did we know.
Right.
So the choices were either do it some other way or cancel it. So we opted that we would do it virtually. Thinking, okay, 2021, which was our 15th anniversary of the Ohioana Book Festival, will be back live, but it didn't turn out to happen that way. And this year, as we were planning 2022, we actually thought, okay, we're going to be live again. We actually hold the event at the main library downtown of Columbus Metropolitan Library, the perfect setting for this event. But in January, on the day that we were having to make the decision, Omicron variant was in full bloom, and that day 25,000 Ohioans were affected and 5,000 went into the hospital. So again, you're having to make a decision, about a future event, and we just thought, we've got to err on the side of safety. And plus, we knew that authors and our audience really had enjoyed the Ohioana Book Festival virtually. We actually found out after our post-festival survey last year that we had people tuning in from 11 states outside of Ohio to a program of the book festival. So, I mean, well, as we love being in person, one thing that virtual events have done it's opened the door to people who might otherwise not be able to participate in the festival. So that's been one of the great things about being virtual. So, and we're virtual right now as you are listening to the Morning Exchange on VOICEcorps, where we're talking about the 2022 Ohioana Book Festival, and I'm just about to turn to Donna Wyland because Don was just talking. We've talked about other careers, education, everything. So, how long have you been a writer, and have you done anything? Or what did you do before you started working? Because you're also a coach. Mm-hmm. And several other things related to, although to your faith.
Yes, that's correct. I did obtain a college degree and majored in marketing and retail. So when I left college, I worked in several industries, some of them unrelated to marketing and retail. I was actually a stockbroker and a certified financial planner, if you can believe that, for a time, and enjoyed it very much. But all that time, I was using my spare time to continue to write, and it just built. And I have files upon files of writing that I produced throughout my career in various industries. I've probably been formally writing about 20 years, and the publication probably really began to flourish within the last 5. So if that tells you anything about writing and publishing, it can be a long journey. Some of my files sat in drawers and folders for a number of years. And then when I would get the time in between careers, I'd pull out the story and have a fresh look at what I had written, and I could easily or more readily see maybe rhyming that wasn't perfect, meter that was off, storylines that had gone awry. So I believe it really helped the stories get stronger, having not hurried to have them published, taking my time. So now I do coach. I love to coach beginning writers. I actually have several individual clients at the moment, and I do offer a workbook called You Can Write on my website. And it's a self-paced workbook that really takes new writers through the process of why do you want to write? What am I interested in? How do I start? So it gives a lot of great information to help someone who would love to see their writing take another step in a positive direction. So
Excellent. Well, that is great. I mean, you're all such varied writers, etc. And like I said, that's what we love about the Ohioana Book Festival, that we can, introduce to audiences, whether it's on VOICEcorps or a panel discussion online or live in person, everything, we can introduce people to authors in every genre. And a lot of times we'll have people say to us, gosh, I had never heard of that author before, and they're introduced, and pretty soon, that's one of their favorite authors. So it's always very exciting. I'm happy to say, this year, what we try to do every year is give a shot, some new people coming along. So of the 110 authors we had this year, 17 are going to be at the Ohioana Book Festival for their debut book. And for several of them, the Ohioana Book Festival is their very first event that they've ever done. So it's always exciting, to let people know who is out there. And and you can find the list of everybody who's coming to the Ohioana Book Festival, all of the programming that's taking place between now and next week. And you can find that all on our website at www.ohioana.org, which, I want to make sure and everything. So I think maybe all of you have a website and everything. Share that with, because I don't want to forget that. Mark, what is your website?
So my website is buckeyemuscle.com, and it's where you can either purchase a book or also check out my blog where I talk about my sports travels and whatnot.
Bayyinah, how about you?
Yes, my website is gimmethativrecipe.com, and Gimme is spelled Gimme. That recipe.
Excellent. Don.
My website is my name, Don Tassone. That's TASSONE.com. Simple enough, I suppose. And it's a pretty simple website. I've got links to all of my books. You can find them and order them there. And a handful of my short stories, which have not been featured in my published books.
Excellent. And Donna?
Mine also is my name, Donna Wyland, WYLAND.com.
And hasn't that been an important thing? I mean, that's been one of the real advances, in the last 20 years is authors, having a website, because I know how many of our authors connect to their audiences through their website and through their blogs and through their emails and everything of that nature. So in addition to all of the information we have about the Ohioana Book Festival, when you go to our author pages, you click on an individual author's biography, we will normally have their website, because we can't put all of the information about them. So that is a place to always go and find out about all of what they're doing. I want to say and everything, I brought, and Amy left the studio, but anyway, I brought copies of the Ohioana Quarterly. Our spring edition is always the Ohioana Book Festival edition. You see the colorful photo on the front cover by Terry Liebenson. We've had an Ohio illustrator design a poster every year since 2015, and so that's always exciting. And that's the cover of the Ohioana Quarterly. So, and now the Ohioana Quarterly is up online. So if you click on publications link on our website, ohioana.org, you can go right to the spring issue of the Ohioana Quarterly, which will tell you all the information about our authors, covers of all of their books, so it's very colorful. And Bayyinah, we actually have a very exciting thing. It's not often we have a cookbook author, but Bayyinah, you let us share one of your recipes in this.
Yes.
And tell us again what that was, because I'd never heard of it. Cream of wheat?
Yes, it's the cream of wheat cornbread. It's a cornbread alternative to corn. So it was something that I created. It's been around for a while, but I kind of perfected it and created my own twist on it. So it's a lot of people have allergies to corn, or they're not able to eat corn, or some people just don't like cornbread, and that was me. So I created the cream of wheat cornbread, and you can make it for your dishes, your sides, as you would regular cornbread.
Well, it sounds yummy when I heard about it, because I think all of us as kids were familiar with cream of wheat and Quaker oats,
Right.
and it was one of those staples. I'd never heard of it, being as the foundation for a recipe for cornbread. So it's fantastic. Thank you, and thank you for sharing that with our readers.
Well, thank you for having it.
Yes.
I saw the flyer, and it's really, really well done. So thank you for highlighting that recipe. I'm sure the readers will enjoy the recipe.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, like I said, it's not always we have a cookbook author. So at times when we have had one, we've kind of like said, hey, for this issue, can we share? Del Sroof actually, when he was here, and of course he's a vegetarian cook, so he shared a vegetarian recipe. And our very first cookbook author we ever had was Jenny of Jenny's Ice Cream. So she shared a recipe for an ice cream dessert. So very yummy. So thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, Mark,
You're welcome.
I don't know if you have any favorite recipes or anything and stuff, but in, like I said, when you're not writing and doing all of the other things and everything, are what are you spending your time doing and everything?
If I get the time to do it, usually I'll travel to another city just to visit it and just to get away from Ohio for a few days. I stated earlier that I'm a huge sports fan, so most of the time if I'm going somewhere, it's for a sporting event. So earlier in the month, I went to Dallas, Texas for WrestleMania, one of the biggest wrestling events in the world. And while I was there, I was able to enjoy the sights of Dallas. So me and a friend, we went to the sixth floor museum. We also went over to a couple of barbecue places to eat some of the great Texas barbecue. So delicious, very good. And yeah, that's usually what I do. Either that, or I'm thinking of another book to continue the Elijah series.
Well, I was going to say, everything when you are traveling, when you're visiting these other towns, are you kind of, as you're doing this, doing some research for a future project?
Yeah, so usually if I go to a city, I'll go to it just to enjoy it, but I also take mental notes as well as some written notes on, okay, maybe this is a place I could highlight in a future book, or maybe this food I could highlight in a book. So I always think of ways where I can either create a new book or just expand upon a book that I've already written.
Wonderful. Wonderful. You are listening to Morning Exchange on VOICEcorps. My name is David Weaver. I'm the Executive Director of the Ohioana Library, and delighted that VOICEcorps has invited us on today to talk about the Ohioana Book Festival. And I am here in the studio with Mark Darden and Donna Wyland, and joining us remotely are Bayyinah Monk-Nduaka and Don Tassone. So we're all delighted you could be part of this. And as I was saying, now just Mark, you have told us about your adventures. And it sounds, Don, like you and your wife, you love Ohio, but do you do much traveling?
We do a bit of traveling, domestically, internationally. Of course, lately, domestically.
Yeah.
We also have had the good fortune of welcoming 9 grandchildren into our lives. Our oldest granddaughter, our oldest grandchild is a girl named Lucy. She's only 6 years old. So many of them have been born just in the recent months. It's like a population explosion in our family. 3 of our 4 kids are in the Cincinnati area, so most of our grandkids are here. 2 are in Columbia, Missouri, and we travel there some to see them. But grandparenting has been a brand new dimension in our lives, and a real blessing to us. So that keeps us busy. My wife is with a couple of our grandkids right now nearby, but we have done a bit of traveling and really enjoy traveling and in Ohio and beyond Ohio.
Excellent. And as you are traveling about, are you taking mental notes for a possible writing project?
Yeah, that's a great point. My writing has largely been in the form of short stories, although I do have a couple of novels, one featured in this year's Ohioana Book Festival. Francesca. And I've also just completed a novella, which I'm beginning to pitch publishers on now. And my short stories, and to some extent the novels, really come about as a combination of a couple of things. One is something that's happening in the real world or in my life, something that's happened in my life, and the other is some broader idea, some theme that event or that situation, those incidents help illustrate and help bring to life. And it's really the combination of those two things that's the origin of most of my short stories. So. Yeah, I think a lot of writing for all of us is a reflection of our own life and our own life's experiences. And for me, travel has been a key part of that. And being around the world, I think it shows you both, how different we are, one to another, one culture to another, but also how similar we are. And some of those themes then are abiding, and they kind of cross cultures and age groups and generations and all of that. So I think getting outside of ourselves, is really an important part of writing. Mark Twain said, and I have a favorite quote by Twain, he said that the enemy of prejudice is travel. And I think that's very true. It's been true to my experience, where getting outside of your own skin, outside of your own hometown and your own set of experiences really broadens you and makes you a more tolerant person. And if you're an observer, as I think most authors are, most writers are, you're able to bring that forward through the stories that you're writing. And so, yes, I think travel has been and continues to be an important part of my writing.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. And Donna, obviously a question I'm going to ask you. So have you been to the Holy Land? Given what the inspiration for you and your stories, and I just wondered if that has been reflected in your travels.
Indeed, I have. In 2007, I was able to travel with a tour group over to the Holy Land, and it was incredible to really see the structures that are left, the architectural fascination. I just would sit on the steps and think, my goodness, Jesus could have stood right here. It was overwhelming. And I did get baptized in the Jordan River.
Wow.
Was not the first time I had been baptized in my life, but it was a very emotional and meaningful trip for me. So I was one of many who were baptized in the Jordan River. It was very, very memorable, very special.
Do you hope to go back again?
Yes, I would love to. I keep waiting for the world to be at peace.
Yes.
So I can go back again and see everything. Outside of that, I'm like the other authors. I love to travel, particularly by car now because of COVID. It's just easier. But one of my guilty pleasures is a writing retreat, and I tend to do these fairly regularly, much to my husband's dismay. So I will say, last month I'm working on my next children's book, Rhyming Psalms for Young Hearts, and doing some editing. And I took 3 nights. I should have taken 2. Went to Granville, Ohio, had a wonderful time. The 3rd night, I did have to invite my husband to join me. He was just a little too lonely, and it's so nice to be missed. So I appreciate that, and we had a lovely 3rd night together. So,
and I do want to say, I mean, someone might, the title of your book that you're here for is "'Twas the Night Before Jesus," but this is not necessarily a Christmas book, right? I mean, this is the entire story of Jesus.
Yes. Yes, that's exactly right.
So you don't have to wait to Christmas to buy the book.
That's right. That's right. You can prepare the family. I mean, indeed, it is about Christmas. It ends with beautiful closing about Jesus' birth and celebrating his birth. But yes, it is really the story of his whole life, what he did when he was here, how he died and rose again, and that's what we're celebrating. It's what Christmas is all about.
Well, as we're talking about books, of course, in the Ohioana Book Festival, our official bookseller is the Book Loft of German Village, and you can get copies of any of the titles of the books featured at this year's event at bookloft.com. And, of course, you can go to any other popular venue as well, Amazon.com, etc. But our official bookseller is bookloft.com. And I might say that every purchase you make, a portion of which will go to the Ohioana Library, and will help support and make programs like this, the free Ohioana Book Festival, possible. So I want to thank you very much. I want to throw into it a little bit about travel, is that one of the cool programs that the Ohioana Library has formulated, in addition to the Ohioana Book Festival, is the Ohio Literary Trail. And you mentioned about getting into your car, the Ohio Literary Trail, which you can learn more about on our website as well. And it's kind of like an around-the-state tour of all of the places and people who have been associated with Ohio writing, from Harriet Beecher Stowe in Cincinnati to Toni Morrison up in the Cleveland area, Mildred Ward Benson, the original Carolyn Keene who created the Nancy Drew series up in Toledo, and of course James Thurber here in Columbus, Louis Bromfield in Mansfield. So I'm going to throw that out because I know we have a lot of folks here listening, and they love to travel to exciting places. And given COVID now, I think we're much more inclined to visit places that are pretty close to home. So So that is great. So you can learn more about the Ohio Literary Trail on our website and about the Ohioana Book Festival, which is what we are talking about today on the Morning Exchange. You are listening to the Morning Exchange on VOICEcorps. I'm David Weaver, talking about the 2022 Ohioana Book Festival with our special guest, Mark Darden, author of Elijah Goes to Cleveland, Bayyinah Monk-Nduaka, the author of Gimme That Recipe Spring Cookbook, Don Tassone, author of Francesca, a novel, and Donna Wyland, the author of 'Twas the Night Before Jesus. We're so thrilled that you can be in this studio here and remotely with us for Don and Bayyinah to talk about this. Let me ask you something now, because I know one of the things when we have author panels, when we're at a live event, invariably we get to the point where we are talking, taking questions from the audience. One of the things people always invariably ask, and I suspect it's because they're want-to-be writers, what is your writing process? How did you get published? Mark.
So for Elijah Goes to Cleveland, the way I started off the writing process, I just took my notebook, had some thoughts in my head, and I just started writing down any idea that came to my head, whether it was good or bad. So after I had like a base, kind of like a 5-paragraph essay of the story, then I went on my laptop and tried to expand that story into a 32-page children's book. And I also wrote it in third person, so I didn't have any dialogue or anything like that when I expanded it to 32 pages. And after I did that, I joined a group, the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. So I was in one of their groups, and where we exchange stories and see what could be improved, what's good, what sounds good. After I took notes from that, then I applied it to the story, and then I finally looked and see like what lines I can change to dialogue. And then I took that to an editor, and then she helped me along as well. And then finally I had a solid story that I could work with.
Excellent. Excellent. So
essentially I wrote the book 3 times.
I wanted to ask, so from beginning, from idea for the book to the time you held that book in your hand, how long of a process was that?
For this book, about 9 months or so. So I started writing the book in October of 2020. And I got the story itself completed around late December, early January. Then after I had that completed, it took about a month and a half to find an illustrator to take those words and to put them into pictures. And as for the illustrations, that took about 2.5 months to complete. Then after I had all of that stuff completed, then it took about 2.5 months, 3 months to get the books actually published. So about 9 months or so.
Wow, that's
from
very
start
good.
to finish.
That's good, because I know some authors, depending on who they're working with, can take several years.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly because one of the things that we learned during COVID was basically a lot of the publishing industry on the East Coast, the major centers shut down.
Mm-hmm.
And, we had authors who were going to come to the Ohioana Book Festival last year that said because of COVID and the publishers were working, hey, my book's not to come out in time for the book festival, I might have to apply for next year and stuff. So we find that. Bayyinah, same question to you as to Mark and everything. Your writing process, since you were working in the nonfiction realm and specifically in putting together recipes for a cookbook, how long of a period of time did it? Did you always have these recipes in your hand?
No, it was with cookbooks it's quite different. So I wanted to make sure that my recipes came out precisely once the readers made the dishes. So I had to cook the dishes and actually measure it, because when you're cooking, you don't really measure. When you're cooking your own dishes, you don't really measure it. So I had to go through a lot of the dishes and actually write down, okay, do I normally use like a cup or a half a teaspoon? So that was the process. And as far as the recipes, a lot of the recipes were kind of in my head. When I went away to college, I would call my mother And I was like, Mom, how do you make this spaghetti? Or, how would you, make this this pie? So it kind of was in my head, and I just kind of started going through my mental Rolodex and just started writing them down. So that pre-writing stage took about 3 years, and then marrying my husband, who was from Nigeria, I started to learn how to cook his cuisine. And I started to realize that a lot of the ingredients were like the same. They were just called different names. So once I learned how to cook some Nigerian cuisines, I started jotting those down. So that's kind of how I started collecting the recipes. And that was my pre-writing stage. And then I decided, okay, let's just write this book, because I wanted to, my first book, I wanted to show the world that recipes, that the foods that we eat around the world are kind of similar. And so also with my travels, I've collected recipes with that too. So we were in Turkey, and I remember we were eating hummus, and the cook came out, and I said, "Oh, you did a great job." He was asking how was the food, and I said, "Oh, it was a great job. This was one of the best hummus that we had." And he's like, "Oh, you're from America?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's always wanted to learn how to fry American chicken, American style. So I'm giving him American fried chicken recipes, and he's giving me Turkish hummus recipes. So I also collected recipes as I traveled along the way. So that was how I started to collect different recipes from around the world. And my first cookbook was Give Me That Recipe, just recipes that I collected just, through my travels and my family recipes that we created in our homes and during the holidays. And after I do that, have my recipes written out, that's when I actually put them in a format, a recipe format. And then you revise, and I edit. And the editing process takes a while, because I wanted to make sure that the measurements were perfect. So I went back and double checked my cooking. So there was a lot of wasted food, because especially when you're baking, you want to make sure it's right. So I had an angry husband saying, "Oh, you're wasting food," and they were giving food to neighbors and things. So when you're writing a cookbook, it definitely is a different process than writing the regular book. So and then after I felt all the recipes was tried and checked and thorough, that's when we went on and we published. So.
Wow. Well, thanks for sharing that inside look on. So it sounds like your process, was took a little longer than Mark's did. Now, Don, even though you focus mostly on your writing since retiring from the corporate world, you've been pretty prolific with 2 novels and 6 short story collections and a novella to come. So, is your writing process, are you a fast writer?
Yeah, I am a fast writer, actually. I'm a slow rewriter, but I'm a fast writer.
Editing.
Yeah, amen. I would say the process I follow for long form writing, though, differs dramatically from the process I follow for short form writing, for short stories. In terms of long form writing, novels like the one featured now, Francesca, my background is in business, and I think that's kind of in my blood. And so I've taken kind of a linear approach to it. I develop just a very short, very brief summary, almost like jacket copy would read, for example, on the back of a book, to try to summarize what I have in mind for a given book. I then develop a synopsis, a one-page summary of the book, and from there, a chapter outline. And only once I have those, and in some cases, I actually work with a small group of writing friends, people whose writing I greatly admire and whose opinions I really trust and value. And I might vet the synopsis, say, with them, just to make sure it's tight, that it flows well, that there aren't any gaps, that kind of thing. Get their feedback on that, and then I begin the writing process. And I am a fairly fast writer. I would say in the case of the novels, I probably was able to knock those out in a couple of months, at least in rough draft form, the manuscripts. But then the real the real work begins, which is the rewriting. And for me, that's typically taken the bulk of the time that I've needed to write these books. Hemingway said the only kind of writing is rewriting, and that's certainly been my experience. And I find joy in that, revising it. What happens for me is everything I just described, that linear way of thinking about a story kind of goes out the window. What happens is the story changes, and the characters begin to take on a life of their own. Dialogue takes on a life of its own. Drama gets rearranged and probably enhanced, and the story just gets larger. So what might have been a 60,000 word manuscript becomes an 85,000 word manuscript, and the number of chapters increases as well. And I think that's kind of the writing process for me. It's iterative and not so linear. Much as I'd like to make it linear, it's just not. I would say the process of writing my novels has taken upwards of about a couple of years from the time I began to when I had a really good, strong manuscript I felt comfortable sharing with publishers. But my process for writing short stories is dramatically different and much simpler. I usually just jump into the plot, and my main focus is in getting the plot down as simply as I can, and then and only then begin to develop a dialogue and descriptions and put some refinements into the story. I do write one short story a week. I'm committed to doing that, and I do that in part just to keep myself sharp. So I find that the short form writing, which is so much easier and so much faster and simpler, really helps my longer form writing, and vice versa. One hand washes the other. And so I find myself as a writer going down these two parallel tracks, and the balance between those is really important to me. So that's kind of about my writing process. One other quick thing, David, just for the purpose of the audience who is listening and may be interested in writing but not have done a lot of writing. I'm a living example of that. I've done a lot of business writing, but when I retired from P&G and decided to try to start writing creatively, I found I was really struggling with that. And so I ended up going away to a workshop, and Donna mentioned the importance of doing this. It was a 1-week writing workshop in a place called New Harmony, Indiana, which is near Evansville. And I hung out there for about a week with a bunch of 20-somethings. And it was fantastic. It was a reimmersion in the fundamentals of creative writing for me. And from there, I began writing creatively and submitting my writing for publication in literary magazines and so forth. And I never really looked back. But I consider that really a pivotal part for me. And I mention that only by way of saying, whatever your background is, however old you are, whatever your experiences are, it's never too late. And all of that is to the good. So you bring your experiences and your skills, and you refine your skills. You bring it all with you, and it becomes a part of your story.
Thanks so much, Don. I appreciate that. So, looking at your process, we're listening to the Morning Exchange on VOICEcorps, talking about the 2022 Ohioana Book Festival. Learn all about it at www.ohioana.org. And I'm going to turn back to Donna Wyland, because like Mark Darden, you have written a picture book that is featured this year for the book festival. 'Twas the Night Before Jesus. So what about your process, and did the words come first, the pictures, etc.? I'm assuming the words come first.
The words do come first. I am not an artist. That is the one gift I would ask for when I get to heaven. I cannot draw at all. But you would think a children's book would be shorter, quicker, much easier to write. But it really takes a lot of effort. Every single word counts. So for me, the process can be several years long, just as it was for Don and others, because you start with the initial. I'm a pantser, by the way. In the writing world, that is someone that just sits down and lets the story write itself. I don't tend to plot a lot of things, although with the life of Jesus, I couldn't really take creative license with that, but
Yes.
but I have written a novel. I do have other books, and I tend to let the story write itself. With the children's story, what was most difficult was getting that exact word, that exact rhyme. I lived with my thesaurus, my dictionary, my rhyming dictionary. It was really quite a labor, and it was never written to be "'Twas the Night Before Jesus." It was actually called Everything Jesus as a working title, and it was a story that started on the night before Jesus. It was only in the last year or two that I really believe that God inspired me to change that to "'Twas the Night Before Jesus," and those final stanzas were written probably 6 months before publication to really wrap it all up and bring it together. So...
Fascinating. It's, well, and like I said, so we see, from all four of our authors, what a different commitment of time and effort it takes, etc. So, important thing I want to ask you all very quickly as we're winding down the program. So, what's your next book, Mark Darden?
So for me, my next book is going to continue the Elijah series. So I was thinking about either going to Washington, D.C. or the city of Philadelphia for Elijah's next adventure.
Wow, you can visit Bayyinah, Monk-Nduaka. So, Bayyinah, what's next? What's next for you in the Give Me That Recipe series?
Yeah, so we're working on the relationship book from the first one. So hopefully that'll be published by the end of next year.
Excellent. Don Tassone, we know you've got a novella before the publisher, and what's beyond that?
Yeah, this novella is something that I'm just wrapping up and beginning to pitch to publishers. I mentioned before that my stories typically come out, at least in part, come out of real life experiences. As I look around, and I'm sure the same is the case for all of us. It's a very difficult time to be alive. There are a lot of challenges, and young people today are called the loneliest generation. This is a generation of people challenged in new ways. They don't have as many meaningful relationships in their lives, even though ironically they're online all the time. Rates of anxiety and depression are skyrocketing, and young people are hardwired for socialization at the very time when we're all isolated. So it's a most difficult time. And
yes,
and I had that group in mind really as I was writing this story. It's called the Liberation of Jacob Novak, and it's a novella geared more toward young adults, and I hope it really speaks to their experience.
Excellent. Donna, your next project.
Another picture book entitled Rhyming Psalms for Young Hearts, and it is taking literal psalms from the Bible, keeping their meaning and writing them in a children's language.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for joining me. Mark Darden, Elijah Goes to Cleveland, Bayyinah, Monk-Nduaka, Give Me That Recipe Spring Cookbook, Don Tassone, Francesca novel, and Donna Wyland, 'Twas the Night Before Jesus. Thank you all for joining us. I'm David Weaver. That's all for Morning Exchange. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned for more programming on VOICEcorps.